Beloved folk, it is wonderful to be here, and I am honored to be leading this conversation with our amazing alumni. I am going to jump right into it. Although I will say this, I am honored to have just commenced just 2.5 weeks ago. And it is wonderful now for us to be able to be together, not only in this group of Alumnx, but also to be able to hear from folks who have gone before me to do that same walk, and also to see where it is that this road and their time at PSR has taken them. We'll be speaking to 3 different people today. We'll start off with Reverend Bill Jacobs, who has been guiding light ministry for many decades. After 5 decades as a pastoral intern, co-pastor, senior pastor, and co-interim minister serving disciples and the UCC church congregations, Bill is now retired as of last year, is now active in his local congregations in action and outreach committee work, particularly down in Orange County, where Bill has recently pulled together volunteers from the Orange County congregations to assist with refugee settlements for Afghans fleeing the Taliban. Bill also served on the PSR Board of Trustees for 2 6-year terms and has contributed to PSR's annual fund and to various capital campaigns for more than 40 years. Welcome, Bill. Thank you for joining us.
Well, thank you. Hello, everybody. I point out first that I'm going to have to leave after the break because I'm going to attend the funeral of a nursery worker that's in a church 2 miles away. She was murdered by her boyfriend. And can I just say, I really hate household handguns. But I think I'm here as part of the pre-regenerated ecosystem of seminary students. I want to share some ways local churches have changed in my lifetime. I came to seminary after 3 months after graduating college and hoping to be ordained. I wanted to serve in a local church. I wanted to be like the pastor of the church I grew up in. And that didn't happen. I know that's true for all of you. I had classmates that wanted to serve as chaplains, professors. They ended up as journalists, judicatory execs, entrepreneurs in spiritual practices. A lot of us lived through what I'd call worship wars or worship creativity. A lot of us were part of the rise of gender diverse leadership models. And we helped emerging ministries that don't have any investment in brick and mortar. But that's where I started. And that's where I've been for a long time. Almost all of us started in a very small church, a church, what I'd call mainline on the sideline, which shrinking violet Christian church, I guess. We came across one or more hardened traditionalists in that church, as you might have in your church. Hardly ever was that church thriving numerically or financially. And at board meetings in those churches, we tended to focus on finances and fellowship, the roof that leaks, the what to serve at coffee hour. And we'd get flack if we changed the order of worship, let alone the words of anthems or hymns. A prominent church family at almost every church somewhere has run off a pastor or two, and we'd wonder if we're next. And at the end of that first church, you'd say, is this really all there is? That's when we had to be fearless just to survive that first church. Unless in Vallejo, the first church I served, it was amazing. The church paid us enough that we could buy a house in that community. Now that house was worth $45,000. So that tells you how long ago it's been since I started. But when I had been in that house about 3 months, the postal carrier came up, mail carrier, knocked on the door and said, excuse me, I noticed that the mail you get is really interesting. He'd probably be fired now. But I think there are people in this community that would be interested in some of the things that you get letters for. And then I started to talk to a bus driver coming up from San Francisco late at night, and he was interested in the same topics. And the guy down the street in the neighborhood was also interested as he walked by, and some church members too. And we ended up starting a Vallejo Peace Environment Center. I'm sure it's gone now, but it was illustration of a way that something can happen that doesn't just involve your church members, but does involve them. At some point, you start to see what's possible when church folks and neighborhood folks are mobilized and organized and inspired by the things that you think need to be addressed or the things that they think need to be addressed. And you agree with. And you recruit your folks and they walk in the pride parade or they go to the city council or they go to school board meetings. I joined the Planned Parenthood board. Things like this really made me feel like the church could be alive. And if you survive the first church, and it's important that we learn how to do that, sometime you're called to a place more capable of embracing the creativity that PSR embodies and the edgy radicality of what guns my engine these days. So I served 11 congregations over 5 decades. And I think I was pretty lucky in that I loved the people that I served in every single place. I loved the artists, the activists, the oddball kids, the teachers, even the fix-it guys on Saturdays and the tech gurus and the old poops in the board meetings. I just appreciated the gift of relationships that come over time in a local congregation, teachers that start to get the theology behind your sermons, and children and youth that don't roll their eyes that much when you participate in worship with you. And eventually some young people become leaders, and some leaders before long, you're ending up comforting them on the death of their parents or their partners or even their children. So I really wanted to just stress that for me, it's been a blessing to be in pastoral ministry. I've learned to offer generous amounts of love and forgiveness alongside bold and fearless proclamations. It really helps if people understand that you think God is a God of second chances. I need to give them to myself. I need to give them to others. It's like that doctor that you go in and visit and they say, if you lost weight, you'd probably feel better. Well, sure, that's great. And you come next, and if you lost a little weight, maybe you'd feel better. Well, third time, fourth time, and eventually you say, hey, I decided to lose some weight. I feel really great. That's kind of what happens sometimes in the church. Is it really takes a while. Jim Mitalski has a breakout session this afternoon called "I'm Still Pastoring." Now, I don't know what the topic of that session is. Maybe he's in a different setting than local church, but that's how I feel. I'm still pastoring, even though I know the local congregations seem like dead end to a lot of PSR students or a lost cause. And I really get why. I've really been as discouraged as some of the rest of my colleagues. I've had colleagues who are caring and creative and strategic and culturally sensitive, and they're well read, they're well spoken, they're loving and they're strategic. And then a few years after they leave the church, they're in the congregation they loved and they labored over as calling it quits, or they're selling their property, or they're hanging on by a thread. It's easy to get discouraged in the work.
Reverend Jacobs.
Thank
Reverend
you.
Jacobs.
Yeah.
Reverend Jacobs.
Can we move up,
Thank you.
please?
Thank you so much. I want us to be able to have and hear from everybody. So I certainly appreciate you being able to share that. And if I may, I'd like to introduce our other two panelists and give them a chance to speak into some things that are on their heart, and then maybe ask one or two questions before we wrap up and move on to those breakout sessions, as you just mentioned. So thank you and blessings for joining us.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Well,
Our next
one Facebook post that was written by somebody who's joined a church, who's serving a church right now. This is a short post, and I wanted to finish with this. She wrote, "Today I'm being installed at Community Christian Church in Tempe, where I get to be the minister in this space of welcome and guide our shared ministry. I've had some good fits in my 20 plus years in this profession, really good ones, but none have made more sense than this. Yes, they're progressive, but they're so much more than that. They're compassionate, grace-filled, curious storytellers. They're funny and prayerful and lifelong learners, and they care about the earth, their neighbor, the stranger, and each other. They take seriously the call to hospitality, care, and justice, and they're unafraid. which is a remarkable and inspirational thing in a time in the life of the church where fear keeps us hostage. And because of their fearlessness, they open the campus to needs of our community and unabashedly proclaim God's love, try new things, show up at the Capitol and on the street while looking to a future that radiates images of kingdom. I don't know how I got so lucky to be called here, but I hope every day to live up to the ministry community is already doing. What a blessed day. I just wanted to share that newer member of the church community really gives me hope. That's all I had to say.
Thank you. That is a lovely share, and I appreciate you bringing that to this community. I am particularly touched by your point on the gift of relationships and thinking about that, how it relates to others. And I think it's a wonderful way to lead into our next panelist, who I have had the pleasure of actually being in the physical presence of within the last 5 months. Reverend Adrian Thorne, MDiv graduate of PSR, is the 8th senior minister of the historic Riverside Church in the city of New York and the first African-American woman to hold the position. Known for her progressive approach to ministry and deep commitment to social justice, Reverend Thorne has been at the forefront of many transformative initiatives within her community. Adrian, thank you for allowing me to call you that. I would love you to possibly give just a little bit of what it is that this PSR education, how it influences the work that you're doing there in New York, and how it is that it's impacting your life.
Thanks, Mo. It's good to see you. Good afternoon, everyone. So my time at PSR deeply influenced my work and ministry. I think my parenting, the way I just engage the world, from Reverend Dr. Archie Smith Jr., who was my mentor and drilled home the importance of context being everything, to the embodied theology and leadership of Carla de Sola, who taught sacred dance at PSR and showed me that all of life dances. I focused on art and theology in my time at PSR, but additionally, I had a concentration in pastoral care and counseling because I was interested in figuring out the relationship that the arts played in healing and wellness for individuals, institutions, and systems. And so the creative amalgamation of my current ministry, which I call embodied pastoring, took root and was seated at PSR, where I took art and religion classes every semester and where I was given the freedom to write my own ending, to test drive heretical theologies. Like, did Jesus really need to die to save us? So we have dance in our worship, and our congregation moves every Sunday. We center children and youth as worship leaders. We use our imaginations to play and have some fun in the midst of really hard work for love and justice. So I think PSR set me up to be a permission-giving, wonder-seeking, joy-bringing, unapologetic follower of Jesus Christ, who can also sit in spaces with those of other faiths and no faith, a variety of genders and gender expressions, as well as those who name God as mother, holy, divine, or those who are no longer on speaking terms with God. I love the bigness of the tables PSR helped me to imagine, and I'm grateful that out of that largesse, I get to set other similar tables. So I'll just close with this. My time at PSR was also streaked with pain. Like I think a lot of folks who go to seminary, that experience is streaked with pain. I had classmates who used the N word, who didn't recognize me despite the fact that we lived next door to each other on the same dormitory floor, who couldn't speak up in class and name the value of Black life. But those experiences also are part of what made it possible for me to weather equally painful experiences in ministry. There's something in our heartbreak that also helps us to be with the brokenhearted. So I had more to say, but I'll stop there.
Well, that's okay. We're going to get a chance to come back.
Okay, cool.
Embodied pastoring and the bigness of the table. Thank you. Thank you for bringing those elements that were not only personal to you, but I believe speak to everyone here in one way, shape, or form and how they experience both the joy and the challenges of PSR. Our next panelist, Reverend Reina Ramos, an MDiv graduate of 2003, Reverend Raina Ramos is an ordained United Church of Christ minister doing the work of LGBTQI plus inclusion in faith communities. Locally, she leads Spanish-speaking congregations and has co-founded in December of 2011, please forgive me if I pronounce this incorrectly, Ministerio Latino is a home for LGBTQ Latin immigrants and a place where they are welcomed and affirmed. She is a nationally known faith leader fighting for radical inclusion of the LGBTQI community in faith spaces. And Reverend Raina, I want to welcome you to our time today. And if I could ask you to possibly tell us a little bit more about this work that you're doing right now, and also encourage you to speak to how your time at PSR is impacting what it is you're doing now.
Hi, and thank you for having me here. I came to PSR in 2000 after feeling totally burned out from practicing law. I was an attorney of labor law in New York, Long Island, and I had 5 years of fighting cases of exploitation of immigrant workers, and I had it. And I didn't came to seminary or PSR looking to be a pastor. I came to PSR wanting to be renewed, theologically, wanting to be renewed, intellectually, and spiritually, because also I have come out as a lesbian and kicked out of the Baptist church that had been my home for 10 years when I first arrived to the United States. So PSR was sanctuary to me at that time. It was a total restoration. I always tell people that in law school, I never felt smart enough because I was still learning the language, but I was brave enough to go to law school in Long Island, New York, and think that I could do it, and I did it. And it took me 3 times to pass the bar, and I did it. And but when I arrived to PSR, once I had already been a professional out there, PSR embraced me in a way that I will forever be grateful, because teachers will say, Rina Ramos, what did you say? Just repeat it again for the class. And I started to feel intelligent for the first time in my time in the United States. Even with my heavy accent, I started feeling like, God, there was a place for me. There was a place for my ideas. There was a place where I could be all of me. The immigrant, the queer, the Salvadoreña, the theologian, the questioning person that I was. And for that, I will forever be grateful. And, you know, I left seminary thinking that, oh, great, I have another graduate degree under my belt. It's good because then, you know, it will open more doors professionally. But I was far from being a pastor. It wasn't until 2006 that I started entertaining the idea of pastoring, because I felt that it was important for me to create a community that welcomed me and others, and that worship was in Spanish, because that is the language of my God. And so if that's the language of my divinity, that's the language I needed to create worship in. And that is when Plymouth United Church of Christ in Oakland took me in the path of ordination. And then we started the church December 2011. I was ordained in May of 2012. I just celebrated my 12-year ordination. And that day has been one of the happiest days of my life, because I felt that if I was to leave the world at that time, I had come to the world to do what I was born to do, be a pastor, create spaces of sacredness for all of us. And that's the story. I think PSR is a place that did all that for me, can continue doing it for many. I know many seminaries are struggling because they don't see becoming a faith leader, a path that is practical. And my wife doesn't see it as a practical path either. But she thought she was going to marry somebody who was going to one time become a mega church pastor. And I said, dear, that is not me. So the joke is on us. And here I am and happy to be a PSR graduate. Thank you.
Thank you. I am so happy that you found a space where you could feel that you were seen, and that in your being seen, that your voice has been able to go ahead and be elevated for others. And I love that not only all three of you are ministers and pastors, but you've all come to it in very different ways. I know that our time is probably a little bit shorter, so I'm taking some liberties here to be able to make sure that I not only hear from all of you, but maybe take us in a slightly different direction. So I'm going to ask one question, ask each one of you to go ahead and answer that question, and then we'll look to see if there are any questions that have come from the fellow folks that are here with us today, give them a chance to be able to weigh in. I'd like to encourage folks that lean into the opportunities to engage with our alumni, with our Alumnx. There are a number of ways to do that. There is always directly an individual standpoint. There are ways, very fortunately, that I've been able to live over the last year and a half, and that is how Reverend Adrian and I met each other through the Change Happens Now podcast, where you're able to hear a number of other voices, including voices from our own school there, where Reverend Adrian and President David were in conversation with one another. But the one question I'd like to bring to all of you here is not only why is it important to support PSR, but also how can we as alumni, Alumnx, support PSR? There's so many different ways to be able to do that. And I just would love to hear from from your years of experience in doing what you've done, to kind of think about that, both the why and the how in that support of PSR, particularly as President David has brought up that we are truly at a very evolutionary point for the school. So I'd love to be able to have that. And if I may, Reverend Rena, I would love for you to start, if you would, please.
Sure. And the most practical way, if you are asked to donate, give your $25. If that's all you can give it to PSR, because it's worth it. It was a place that shaped us in some way and form. So definitely, if you have it in your pocket, and sometimes we don't, but if you please always be ready to donate. Then proclaim the good news of PSR to anybody who asks you. Say to everybody who asks you, that's a great place to attend. And then as the evolution continues, and I hope it continues, so that many, many more people of color can find the accreditation to become faith leaders and don't have to be indebted with the school loans. As the evolution continues, that we help this evolution to create a new way of being seminarians, because the old way is expensive and not attractive. And so that's my 2 cents on this.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I'm going to go back to how we started. Or maybe not. Reverend Adrian, how about your thoughts on this as well?
I think what I could add to what Reverend Rena has shared is about the good news. I think in a world that is polarized and hurting, where we dare to deny the humanity of any of God's children, we need places like PSR to remind us that the imprint of the holy is on our neighbors and our enemies as well. So I think when people are considering next steps and thinking about theological education, to be able to say that there's a place like this that holds all the parts of who we are, and offers a theological education that pushes the boundaries, not only of society, but our own internal boundaries as well, is important work for us to do. In addition to money, I think when PSR comes knocking and asking you to volunteer, we say yes. This is my third event today. I'm super tired. But whenever David invites me or someone from PSR invites me, if unless it's got conflict with my parents or my kid, I say yes. So money and I think our time and talent is important to give to PSR.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Reverend Bill, your thoughts? I believe you might be muted, my
I think I
friend.
am now unmuted. How about
Thank
that? It took me a while to
Lovely.
figure out that the seminary isn't just asking for an annual gift. When you graduate right away, you understand student debt and figure out professors aren't exactly rolling in money. They are also financially pinched, and the seminary has costs. However, capital campaigns like this one don't depend just on somebody writing a check with a lot of zeros or transferring assets right away, because which one of us can do that? On the other hand, Mary and I have a retirement account that's an annuity that, or maybe you have a life insurance policy. Our kids are now grown. Our house is nearly paid for, and identifying that as a gift that will come in the future contributes to this campaign, even though it doesn't come right away. I mean, that is part of reaching the goal, is including numbers that we can't personally hand over today, but that might be available to the seminary in the future. So that just financially is important. I also think it's just, I've sent people to seminary from my congregations and things like that. I stay in touch with alums, and that's important. But I do think it's a financial issue as well, and I'm glad I've been able to do some of that.
Thank you. You know, I would be remiss, since my experience is probably the most recent of all of you, having just completed this journey and been walking through a number of the significant changes that are happening. Reverend Marina, I want to thank you for speaking to this idea of access to a seminary education that I believe all of you have been looped into as well. That our treasure and our time and our talent are all important, but if we are not able to look at ways to provide accessible and innovative ways for folks to come into this work, particularly for those, even like myself, who's not planning on going into pastoral ministry, but still want to be an active community and faith-rooted organizer and leader. So please, as President David has brought up, know that this institution is trying to do some very innovative things and look at ways to be able to provide accessible and equitable ways for folks to be able to enter into this, and to do it at a space that is open and unafraid and bold in its message and its way of bringing people in and supporting them. I would love to throw this out to our group to see if there are any questions. I've been trying to monitor the chat. If anybody else has, please just speak up or throw up your hand or take yourself off mute. But if you have a question for these amazing panelists, I would love for you to be able to share that with them so they could speak to you. Can you speak to clergy burnout? Okay, there we go. Tino, jumping right in. I opened that up to all of you. Yeah, oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
It is a real thing. It exists. And one of the things I found money to do is that I got a grant to run one-day restoration retreats for faith leaders, free of charge for the faith leaders, because it needs to be accessible that way, in which we do body movement, we do energy work. It's not religious at all, to be open and interfaith, so that nobody feels is Christocentric. And we have music and definitely good food. And that is important as part of our work, because I feel that those spaces are so limited, and only people with extra income can access the yoga, the massages. And so I thought, and I sold the idea to the Akonadi Foundation in Auckland, that this was part of healing, spiritual healing. And so let's tackle it some way, somehow.
Yes, thank you.
I would add, I think we need to educate our people, whether we're serving in congregations or not-for-profits. I think people just are not aware of the amount of time and energy that our theological leaders put into their work, whether they're seminary presidents or pastors of churches. You know, people have partners and children, and sometimes we need to just let them know. And then the other thing I will say there, in my studies with Resmaa Menakem, who's an embodied somatic abolitionist, he wrote My Grandmother's Hands. He said that people will pay you and think that they can eat your heart. So just because we're being paid, and very many of us are not being paid anywhere near enough, you have to say to people, I have this time off, or I can't work morning, noon, and night. Do not let people eat your heart, no matter how much money they are paying you. They don't get to eat you up.
Thank you. Thank you for bringing Brother Resmaa into this conversation. He was a key part of my contextual thinking class. So letting you know that he who is on your heart and you have spent time with him in study is also an active part of our curriculum at PSR as well too. I want to be respectful of everyone's time. Go ahead and ask that we sort of wrap it here if we can, and just say a huge thank you to the three of you for your time, for your commitment, to your words, to your encouragement to us to donate, proclaim the good news of PSR, work to make sure that we are providing that access to a seminary education, and looking at various ways that we can all share our time, our treasure, and our talent in innovative ways for the benefit of the school and all. So thank you all very much. Thank you, Reverend Bill. Thank you, Reverend Rena. Thank you, Reverend Adrian. Appreciation and love to all of you. I would like to actually just throw one other element in before we take our break, and that is around thinking about scholarship. There's some interesting information that I'm not sure that everybody will just go ahead and share. You know, it costs about $75,000 a year to provide a seminary education for students. And this is an average cost across all ATS schools, and it's similar to the cost for most graduate schools. So thanks to the generosity of donors, our endowment, and our revenue from the property, we were able to set our tuition at under $20,000, which is about 25% of the actual cost. Even with the steep discount, some students need additional support in the form of need-based merit scholarships, making high-quality theological education accessible, far more accessible, as Reverend Rena brought up, for many. You know, this kind of financial assistance ensures that a broader range of students can benefit from PSR's exceptional programs, regardless of their financial background. And so with that in mind, keeping in mind for all of us that anything that we can do to support, and the support that you are able to provide, helps us help those students that are here. The last 2 to 3 years, PSR has had some of the largest incoming classes of the previous decades. There was a time when, as we had said, that seminary education had a very different look, as President David told us. As we're moving through now, we're finding new students are finding new ways to come in, and making sure that we are all providing all that we can in whatever way we possibly can is a wonderful way to support this work. So I offer that to you as I close this part of our session. I believe that we'll have a short video rolling, and then after that video, a short break, and then we will move into our breakout session. So blessings and thank you to all of you.
Religion and spirituality needs some new representatives right now in our culture and in our society. You really need to invest in spiritually rooted change agents, because through the people comes the new world.
It's experiential. It's a whole different way of looking at education, of looking at growth and connection with other people.
PSR, that tradition of boldness, is something that we not just learn in our classroom and in our community, it's something that becomes part of who we are, and it is nurtured deep down in our soul.
For individuals for whom those scholarships were not available, would not see PSR as a part of their future, I see that as critically important.